Hello and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be reviewing my custom LEGO Transformers Prime Optimus. And before I get into this review, please remember to like, comment and subscribe if you want to see weekly LEGO Transformers. Now, as you can see, the truck mode is a little bit rough. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm happy with it, when clearly it does have some issues. As you can see, it is slightly gappy, and the truck bed is a complete mess, and that is mainly because the robot mode just took priority. And that does make it one of the most accurate robot modes that I've done. However, that obviously comes at the cost of the truck mode accuracy. Now, it's not completely inaccurate, as it does actually look quite close to the real truck. However, it doesn't hold together well, and you can see there is quite a lot of gaps. And even though it has the basic silhouette of the truck mode, it just doesn't look quite right, as some of the proportions are slightly off, and the gaps beside the windshield are quite noticeable. But he does scale pretty nicely with Speed Champions as well as minifigures, which is quite nice. But I think that's enough for the truck mode, as the robot mode is superior in every way, so we might as well get onto that. So I think it's time for the transformation. So to start with the transformation, we're going to take the sunroof piece, and you can see the ball joints which are going to connect to his feet, and this assembly will just hinge up. And there's also a swivel joint inside the knee, which is going to be used to extend all of these pieces, including the sides of the cab. And we can also hinge up the head. And coming to the front, this is where you'll see a lot of similarities to the first edition, as we're going to have to hinge as well as hinging the tires, which is exactly how the first edition transforms. And we can also unfold this entire section, which will form his chest. And coming to the torso, we can now unhinge it, as it should just extend out like that. Now we can compress the ratchet pieces, which it should look something like that, as this just brings the torso together. And using the hinge, we can also just fold in these wheel pieces, which will form the grille on the back. Which isn't accurate to the show, but I'll speak about that later. And we can also unfold this windshield piece, as well as tab in the arms to the side. And if you have the first edition, you'll see, so far it's looking pretty accurate to that figure. So now we can fold up that piece, as well as rotate it around on the stud. And we can unfold it again, as this will just secure the torso so it's not folding about. So that should be it for this torso section. So now we can come to the legs. So using the series of ball joints, we can just fold up these pieces just to set them aside for now, so that we can get the feet done. And the top section of the truck will rotate around on these ball joints, and the feet can now be compressed. But first we'll need to put them forward at the ball joint, and now they should tab together, just like that, and this will also form his heels, which doesn't give him quite a bit of stability. And now for the worst part of the transformation, compressing these pieces in, as they do have a tendency to fall off. But once they're done, we can work on the arms. So using the ball joint of the elbow, we can just extend it like that. And we can also start rotating these pieces around, which should look something like this. And now using the ball joint at the elbow, we can just rotate it around a full 180 degrees. And as you can see, we'll now need to move the red sections, as they should just swivel in on the stud connection. And we can also bring the arms slightly closer to the sides. And for the final step, we can just hinge up these pieces just like that, and that will form his arms. So here he is in robot mode, and as you can see, this is pretty accurate to the show, and is also one of my favourite builds that I've done, as even though the truck mode isn't accurate, the robot mode is pretty cool, and is also accurate enough that the truck mode doesn't bother me. Unfortunately, he is slightly too tall to fit all in one frame, so that's why I'm just doing this slow panning down, so you can see some of the details. But speaking of details, we can bring it closer. So here for the chest, you can see this is based on the first edition, which I think is a pretty good figure, even if I don't own it. And obviously, from the transformation you can tell I did base a lot from that figure. Especially in the torso transformation, the legs were more or less my own design. But the torso here is pretty wide, which is actually accurate to the show. And I have seen some people comparing him to Bay vs Starscream, which I guess makes sense as he is pretty wide, like I said. However, if you look up a picture of his on-screen model, this is actually very accurate. As in the show, he does have this slightly cartoonish style model, which obviously is hard to recreate in LEGO, as the proportions are not realistic to fit into that truck. But I'd say I've done a pretty good job recreating it here. And the chest does look pretty good in my opinion. I especially like how this fake windshield piece turned out, as having the hinges in black does help it blend in, and it looks pretty good for having to fold in half. And here is his thin waist, which is very accurate to the show. These blue pieces are also pretty accurate, even if they are slightly the wrong shape. Unfortunately, the shoulder pads are definitely too small, but they did have to fit within the front cab of the truck. And just due to how he transformed, I couldn't really fit in an accurate shoulder pad, which obviously would have been bigger. But I think for the way he transforms, these work pretty well. And it doesn't bother me that much. It also doesn't really bother me not having the smokestacks, as obviously I did want to have them here, but having those panels compress onto the back made him way too top heavy, so having them on a leg is a good compromise just for the stability. And speaking of those panels, here they are, and they don't look that great. However, like I said, if I'd added them to the torso, he would have been way too top heavy, so having them here is a good compromise. The wheels also are slightly inaccurate, as the bottom one is slightly further away, but that's just due to having him roll in truck mode. The torso is slightly hollow, but that's just due to the first edition transformation scheme, as the arms and stuff do have to fit into that gap in truck mode. But the way all these wheel well and grille sections fold in the robot mode to hide the old windshield is really satisfying. And in my opinion, it does work pretty well for this guy. But as you can see, it does stick out slightly from the torso, which is why I couldn't have the smokestacks on the back, as I didn't want him to tip over. But for some comparisons, here he is with Siege Prime, and as you can see, he is pretty massive. I will say the legs are probably slightly too long, but that's due to the fact that I had to use those knee ratchets, as if I'd only done ball joints, then he would definitely not be able to hold his own weight. So here he is with Earthrise Grapple, which is actually a very recent pickup that I got this morning before recording this review. And as you can see, he is dwarfed. And obviously with a deluxe class, he definitely does not scale, as I don't think he scales with anything in my collection, at least this from Transformers Prime. And here he is with a minifigure, and we're going to have to pan the camera down for this one. And in real world scale, this is probably not far off, but in the show there was definitely some mass shifting going on, as the humans were slightly bigger than that. But it does work quite well here, for a realistic scale. Unfortunately, the posing isn't the best here. The hips are unimpeded in every direction, and the knees can go full 90, but the ankle pivot is pretty limited just due to all the parts there, and the elbows can only bend 45 degrees just due to the way they're constructed. But the shoulders can go full 360, as well as hinge all the way out to the side in that little hinge below the shoulder. And his head can swivel, but that's about it for the posing. But I think that's just about it for this review, as I don't really have much more to say about this guy. So like I said before, if you enjoyed this video, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And I know people were pretty hyped for this video, but in my opinion, this guy's not the greatest, and that's pretty much due to the truck mode. However, first attempt at this design, I think it works quite well, as the design is pretty tricky to recreate in LEGO. And I don't think it's been attempted much at this larger scale. And that's mainly because he does mass shift quite a lot in the show. But anyways, I'll see everybody for the next video. Have a great week.